Hi, I'm Nate Rohr, public address announcer for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and you're watching and listening to PAA Game Day.
Please welcome the host of PAA Game Day and a public address announcer for Syracuse University and Colgate University, as well as the New York State Public High School Athletic Association for numerous championships, Tom Winiecki.
So hi everyone, and welcome back to PAA Game Day, the show where we meet the voices who make the games that we love feel more than just a game. Those voices that we hear all the time, but we rarely get to know. I'm Tom Winiecki, and today's guest, well, if you've ever been to a Nebraska Cornhusker football game or a recent Kansas City Chiefs football game, you've heard him. You might not see him, but his voice is the sound of game day. I'm talking about Nate Rohr, the man behind the mic at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska, and now at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. So Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be with you, Tom, and excited to chat about public address announcing.
Great. All right, Nate, let's start way back. Before the NFL crowds and the Husker fans, you were just a kid in Beatrice, Nebraska, calling high school games. Talk about that journey from Beatrice through that local AM radio station and all those folks that helped you along the way.
Well, yeah, I was really fortunate. My sophomore year in high school, they were looking for a public address announcer for high school sports. I wanted to be a sports announcer since I was 7 years old. I really fell in love with sports when I was very young. And they were preparing for the first home basketball games of the year, my sophomore year, which would have been December of 2000. And so the custom at Beatrice was to have a fine arts student introduce the lineups, read the sportsmanship statement, and then they would tell everyone to rise for the anthem. They'd be done. And the athletic director at Beatrice, John Jarash, identified, and I forget this kid's name, and as you'll find out, I owe this kid a great deal. He identified a senior fine arts kid to introduce the starting lineups. And the kid initially said, "Yeah, I'll do it." But as the show choir uh, class went on, which was fourth period, important because it's the one right before lunch, he starts asking around, and he asks one of my best friends, he's still one of my best friends, Casey Lenneman, "Hey, would you want to do this?" Casey says no, but he had grown up with me. He'd been subjected to all my announcing practice growing up. And Casey says no, but I know somebody who might. And he said he gave him my name. We chatted it over at lunch. I got the sense he didn't really want to do it. And so it was settled by the end of lunch that I was going to be the public address announcer for Beatrice basketball. The girls' basketball coach also knew that I wanted to get into sports announcing. A guy by the name of Steve Hartman. He had been my Sunday school teacher. And he said, why don't you announce the whole game? So not just the starting lineups, not just the national anthem, but every time somebody gets a basket or a foul or whatever, to make it feel bigger. And so I did that for him. And then I did that for the boys' game that night. And so the public address announcing began there. I added wrestling later that winter, Legion baseball that following summer, the summer of 2001. We didn't have school sanctioned baseball at that time, In 2002, I was so sure I was making it as an announcer, or I should say in 2001, my junior year, I gave up playing football and decided I'd announce volleyball. And I also started working at a radio station in Beatrice, KWBE,
Hmm.
as a part timer. And I was so fortunate that Jay Stalder gave me all sorts of opportunities. I mean, I started out just running the board, playing the local ads for Nebraska football games. I also had an air shift from 5 Sunday evenings until we went off the air at
Okay.
11:15. But we were a manually run station, so everything that played, somebody had to hit play, somebody had to turn it up. So that
Okay.
left a lot of part-time hours. So I started doing that my junior year. My senior year, I added football. Um, and so I continued to work at the radio station, which was really important. Working at the radio station brought me into contact with Matt Coatney, who
Hmm.
has done play-by-play on Nebraska women's basketball for 25 years, give or take. He had worked at
Oh, wow.
KWBE previously, yes. And so he would
Hmm.
come down for the big high school basketball tournament in the area, the Winiecki basketball tournament, which is all the smaller schools in the area of Beatrice. And so they would have two sites going. So the sports director would, Brian Cook, was another important figure for me as I was getting settled. Brian would cover one site, Coatney would cover the other, and then they would both come back to the studios and just chat. And I got to sit in on that, and of course that exposed me to Matt, and that opened the door for me to work at Nebraska Media Relations, the athletic PR office for the University of Nebraska. I went to school at the University of Nebraska, and as I was enrolling, um, heading into my second semester, they needed a softball public address announcer. The two guys who had split it the year before graduated that December, and so they needed somebody. Well, I had experience. I knew softball, and so I stepped in and I did the whole season, and that led to working as the public or as their public address announcer through the whole 2004 season. And then as their season wrapped up, we went down to the Big 12 tournament. They needed a play by play guy. They had had a partial season radio package of 12 games, and they had six different guys do play by play. None of the six could take off from work or wanted to get off of work. So they asked me, hey, you've got some radio experience. You've seen the team all year. Can you go down and do that? And I said yes, and that went fairly well. And that led to a 20-year association with the softball program at Nebraska, which continues to this day. So just a lot of good luck, a lot of people having faith in me, and being in a good position to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. Because you know, I think everybody in this business would say one opportunity is generally fed by your last opportunity. I mean,
Absolutely.
very
Yes.
very rarely do you just come out of nowhere and do Nebraska football or Chiefs football.
Hmm.
Usually there's a long stair step process to it, and I've been fortunate that that process has fed one thing to the other to the other.
Well, yeah, it sounds like those people that helped you, Jay, Brian, Matt, and others, those connections that you started to make. And what I've told a lot of people, and other people have said the same thing to me, is that every game you do is an audition because you don't
Certainly,
know who's listening. You have no idea who's out there.
yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And you know, you think about having done softball for 20 some years,
Hmm.
and that led to spotting and doing stats for Nebraska's football broadcast on the radio, and that directly led to me doing the Nebraska football public address. So yeah, it is a good mentality to have. That every time you're on, you know, you're auditioning, whether it's for the job you have or the job you want to have. And I've been fortunate that those things have opened up, once I work in another position.
Yeah, yeah. Now, a lot of announcers I talk to have a story about trying to figure out their own voice. And from Beatrice to where you are now in Nebraska and Kansas City, were there people along the way that you would listen to, either on the radio or on television broadcasts, that help you shape your voice into what it is today as an announcer?
Well, the two guys that were really influential to me growing up as a public address announcer now were Ray Clay, who did the Chicago Bulls, and then Rick Schwieger, who did Nebraska football through the 90s. So those two guys were important to me, just hearing what public address should sound like, enthusiasm behind it. I was more attuned to the radio play by play side of things. My real entree into sports was listening to the Royals. And in the early 90s, it was Denny Matthews and Fred White. And I listened to those guys every night. And so with Denny, very detail oriented, very great handle on the game. Fred had a good handle for the game, but he also was better tuned into the emotions of the game, the excitement of the game. And then that part of it was emphasized all the more growing up listening to Nebraska football in the mid 90s with Kent Pavelka. I mean, that guy, and he still does Nebraska men's basketball, but just the passion that he had in calling it, uh, the influences that I got from play by play bleed into what I do public address wise. Even though there's more of entertainment than information with what we do, I still want to be right. I still want to
Yes.
be accurate and pass along the correct information and
Hmm.
understand that we are there in an informational capacity. But at the same time,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's okay that people hear me and go, okay, that's the Chiefs announcer or that's the Huskers
Mhm.
announcer. And that was a mentality that Kent really communicated and continues to communicate in his play by
Mhm.
play.
Yeah, it sounds like listening to you. You could tell me if I'm on the right track, but it sounds like you weren't trying to imitate those people, but you took bits and pieces and
Sure.
turned into your evolution as a public address announcer. You weren't imitating, you were using them to
Sure.
help you evolve.
Yeah, I mean, you borrow a strand here,
Yeah.
a little piece there, but you also understand you've got your own voice, you've got your own
Yeah.
inflections. Um, Certain things sound better with you than they'll sound for others. Certain
Okay.
things will sound better for them than they
Yeah.
sound with you. I mean, I don't. I would say I don't sound like Ray Clay at all.
Hmm.
And not to say he did a bad job or anything. It's just not where my voice is. And
Yeah.
Rick Schwieger did such a great job here at Nebraska. But there are things that he did that I don't do,
Hmm.
and straight up, I just don't have his voice. I mean, he has killer pipes. He's better known nationally as Rick Allen. He was the lead NASCAR lap by lap
Okay. Okay.
broadcaster. He also now works as as one of the public address announcers for the Carolina Panthers, and he happened to come back for a Nebraska game last year. And I introduced myself and talked to him for a minute, and I went, "Oh, geez, this guy makes me sound like I'm still going through puberty." So,
Okay, well, on that note, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. So hold on, we'll be right back.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Roll sound. Sound production, take 2.
www.publicaddressannouncer.org.
All right, welcome back, folks. We're back here with Nate Rohr. So, Nate, let's get right into it here. The Kansas City Chiefs. There's been stories bouncing around online about what happened or what might have happened. But it felt like everything came together pretty quickly. Can you take us through those steps?
Yeah, the Thursday before the first home game, they played Philadelphia week 2. So the Thursday before the first home game, I get a text from Brad Young, who is the game day producer for the Chiefs, saying, "Hey, would you be available on Sunday? We might need you." And I said, "Yeah, I would be available." Brad had reached out to me kind of in a similar way before 2018. I had filled in as the secondary public address announcer for a Chiefs game, where I was doing the promotions during the TV timeouts and introducing the cheerleaders and the drum corps and what have you.
Okay,
Uh,
if I could just interrupt, I've heard you talk before where we talked about the secondary PA announcer, and you
yeah,
started to describe it there. What exactly is that? I always thought there was one guy who was the PA announcer, but there's two?
sure. So it depends on the team and the setup. My impression is it's more common in the NFL
Mm-hmm.
to have two public address announcers, one that handles essentially the game,
Okay,
which is where's the ball, down distance,
yeah,
spot, ball carrier, tackler. Maybe they do the starting lineups.
okay,
I can tell you the division of labor with the Chiefs. I do a game intro, starting lineups, and basically when the ball's in play.
yeah,
So, and then there's a secondary announcer that handles introducing the cheerleaders, introducing, the various recognitions. We have
okay,
recognitions for service members and fans of the game and things like that.
okay, okay,
So, so yeah, that's how things are set up with the Chiefs. I will tell you, Nebraska, we still use just one.
okay. All right.
And but there's also quite a bit more pre-recorded to where, and that's with a different voice that they contract out. So people still get two voices even if one isn't sitting there.
All right. All right.
Sure. So Thursday, Brad reaches out to me, says, "Hey, are you available? We might need you." I thought it would be for the secondary role again, and I indicated I was available, and he said, "Okay, we're having discussions with Dale Carter, who had done the Chiefs games for 16 years, and we've come to a point where we're trying to change what's going on third down, and he's decided to walk away. And so we need you to do the primary job." And so I said yes. Now I will point out that this was all going on while my grandfather was very sick. I so this is all happening midday Thursday. About the same time, I get a text from my mother that my grandfather's not going to be much longer. He had been in failing health for a while, and he was 90 years old. It was certainly, you're sad to lose him, but you also understand, hey, he's had a long and happy life. So went down to Beatrice, saw him Thursday. He actually passed away Thursday night, but back to the PA gig Thursday afternoon. I confirmed with Brad, hey, you're in. You're the guy on Sunday for the Eagles Chiefs game, and here we go. And so
Okay.
Friday, quick got ready. Didn't really, I didn't do as extensive a prep as maybe I would have liked to have, just because it was a short timetable.
Oh, yeah.
Nebraska was also home On Saturday, they had Houston Christian, which is not quite the same scale, but it's still a Nebraska football
That's
game. It's
right.
still
Still a
80
game.
some
Yep.
thousand people and a big deal.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to quite prep as much as I wanted to, but we were able to get in a place anyway. I know the Chiefs fairly well. I follow the Chiefs.
Mhm.
I'm a Chiefs fan. And then with the Eagles, it was just kind of a crash course, and drove down from Omaha to Kansas City Sunday mid morning, and announced the game. It was a 3:30 Central kick, so that gave me a little breathing room. But
Okay.
announced the game, drove home, and so it began.
I guess so. You were in a position where on the Saturday you're saying "Go Big Red," and the next day you're announcing Patrick Mahomes. I mean that had to be a whirlwind that you really don't know what's happening until after it's over and you have a chance to look back on it.
Well, it was certainly drinking from a fire hose, no doubt about it. And yeah, the Nebraska game was challenging in its own right because Nebraska blew out Houston Christian. And so, in college football, it's a 100 some odd man roster, and Nebraska historically has always had one of the largest rosters in college football. Well, against Houston Christian, those guys are playing. So you're getting all the way down.
Oh yeah.
Obviously in the NFL, it's a little shorter roster to deal with, but yeah, both games were a little challenging, but we got through them. I think I did a reasonably good job. Not to say it was perfect, but did okay, and it
Mhm.
was a heck of a fun weekend.
Oh, I would imagine. Now you've started to paint a picture about what game day and preparation was like a little bit with Nebraska and more so at the NFL level with Kansas City. But let's dive into that a little more. First, we'll pay attention to Lincoln, Nebraska and the Cornhuskers. What's the preparation and game day like at Memorial Stadium for a Big Ten football game?
Well, the preparation, I like to try and memorize some of the opposing team.
Okay.
For most of the year, I mean, at Nebraska, I know Nebraska. I cover them on a daily basis. You see the KLIN backdrop
Hmm.
behind me. I'm the sports director here, and we're the home station for Nebraska football. And so we cover them every day, and I'm around it every day, and so I see the numbers. I know Nebraska fairly well. So early in the week, I try to memorize as many as 40 guys from the opposing team, and it's just sitting there for a half hour with a list of 10 guys. You repeat the first guy, number, name, position for a minute, then you get the second guy for a minute, then you do the first two for a minute, and then it just goes on and on and on. And then during the week, you're sitting at a stoplight, you quick review. Okay, quarterback's 15, doing the Chiefs. Quarterback's 15 Mahomes. Backup quarterback's 17 Gardner Minshew, what have you. You just run through the roster, so you make sure you have them. You still want a flip card in front of you. Don't get me wrong, but um, it just speeds you up.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and again, if the team has a hurry up offense, a quick
Hmm.
tempo,
Oh yeah.
that's very helpful. So memorize guys during the week.
Yeah.
I like to put together charts. I don't do it every game, unfortunately, depending on time constraints.
Hmm.
But I like to try to put together, and I do kind of a numerical spot chart. Um, Numerically, everybody on offense on one legal size page. Numerically, the opponent on defense, and then vice versa for football. The other piece of prep that I do more for Nebraska is I read through the script. Like I mentioned, I'm the only public address announcer. And so I handle a lot of recognitions, a lot of promotional announcements that, very often we're rushing from game action to that recognition. And so I want to have read it. I want to have either tracked down a pronunciation or have the process beginning to where Alex Harris, who essentially is the game day producer for me, he's reaching out to the people he can reach out to to get the pronunciation for the recognition.
Yes.
Because I mean,
Hmm.
look, it's a big deal for these people.
Absolutely.
They're being cheered by 75,000 to eighty
Yeah.
five thousand
Hmm.
people. So you want to get it right. Again, not to say I haven't ever screwed it up, but give yourself the best chance.
Absolutely. Yes.
So with Nebraska, I'm reading through the script. I usually get that Thursday night.
Okay.
Read through it, see if there are any questions, maybe scripting things,
Hmm.
maybe words are in kind of a weird order.
Yeah.
But read through it, email my changes to Alex with the Huskers. And then on game day, I typically, there's not a hard time that I have to be there for Nebraska game day.
Hmm.
I try to be there 4 hours before kick, give or take.
Okay.
And then I sit down and I read down my whole script. So anything that's scripted,
Yep.
I read it down. And again, it's those recognitions, it's those sponsor messages. I do that. I read it out loud. I'm probably the worst person in that booth. Yeah, everybody's a little irritated at me because I'm sitting there reading out loud. But my first game as the Nebraska public address announcer was the Fresno State game in 2016. And before the 2016 season started, Nebraska had a punter named Sam Foltz who died in a car
Yes.
accident.
I
He was
remember
at
that.
a punting clinic. And so he and Mike Sadler from Michigan State passed away. And so, pregame, I looked through the script, but I didn't read it out loud. I didn't. Yeah, I read over it, looked over it, didn't have a great handle on it though. And then it comes time, pregame warm-ups ran a little long. It was the season opener,
Hmm.
and we're trying to get back on time. And it was my first game at Memorial Stadium. And we get to the Sam Foltz Scholarship uh, read
Yeah.
because they're awarding the Sam Foltz Scholarship to Drew Brown, who is a kicker for Nebraska and obviously a
Hmm.
close friend of his. And I stammer over inaugural recipient. And I
Oh.
felt horrible.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's the Sam Foltz recognition on a night where
Yeah.
Nebraska honored him by taking a delay of game penalty
Yes.
rather than punting. But it just bothered me that here on Sam's night, I blew that read. And so to this day, I sit down and I read down my
Hmm.
scripted announcements.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's that work that nobody sees you do that results in your performance on game day. All that's so
sure,
important to do, but nobody realizes it. And
absolutely.
yeah. Now compare that to what you have to do at the NFL level for the Chiefs.
Well, the call time's a little earlier. The call time's 5 hours before kick. Usually, we have a production meeting soon thereafter, um, and we run through the script. I will sit down, and I do have a couple of scripted announcements that I have, but like I said, most of those go to Nate Herron, who is the secondary public address announcer. Um, and so I read what's scripted for me, but there's not very much. I'll go through the roster. If I have a question about a pronunciation, I'll check either with the internal public address announcer with the Chiefs or one of the PR folks. But there's just a little less to do because really until the ball is kicked, there's not much I can practice. The first couple of times we went through starting lineups um, because Nebraska doesn't do a formal starting lineup involving the public address announcer. The team enters the field as a team, which is more common at the college level. So it's very simple. When the front couple of guys start sprinting, I say, "Here come your Nebraska Cornhuskers." With the Chiefs, they do introduce individual starters on one side of the ball, and that's more typical of a pro
Yeah, yeah.
game. And so, first couple of times we had to run through that, but as time has, but I've done all 3 games. I'm a veteran now. But hey, we feel good about the timing there, and frankly, the queue's pretty simple
Yeah.
for me. There's plenty more going on. I'll run through the starting lineup one
Hmm.
time, just in the booth, just to make sure. We have Kingsley Suamataia on our roster.
Oh, those are the fun ones to
He's the
say.
starting offensive guard,
Yeah.
and boy, it took me a while to get him. So,
But boy,
so yeah,
but
that's
do they appreciate it when you hit it right, though?
oh yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I
Yes.
mean, especially those linemen, because hopefully that's the one time you say their name.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hope it's not the referee because they have to call them for holding or something.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
Now, with all that, what happens if Nebraska plays on Saturday and the Chiefs have a home game on Sunday? How does that work with you traveling? How do you do that?
Well, and I should point out, I live in Omaha, so I'm spending a lot of time on the interstate anyway.
Okay.
That was actually the scenario you just laid down was actually my first weekend.
Oh wow.
Because the Huskers had the first weekend doing Chiefs
Yep.
now.
Yep. Yep.
The Huskers kicked off at 11 a.m. Saturday, and the Chiefs kicked off at 3:30. Um, so it's a little challenging just from the standpoint that it's a lot of time on the road,
Hmm.
but it's just drive. It's work the game in Lincoln because
Yeah.
of my full time position with KLIN Radio. I go down to the post game news conference and get some sound that we'll use on our newscasts, our
Okay.
sportscasts.
Okay.
Um, but then pack everything up, go home, and then wake up the next day and head down to Kansas City. I will tell you, I've been pretty lucky. Again, we've done 3 games. Um, where the first 2 were 3:30 kicks or 3:25
Okay.
Central kicks, and then the latest one was the Detroit Lions game, which was the Sunday
Okay. Yeah.
night
Sunday
game.
night. Yep.
I have my first noon kick this weekend, Chiefs
Uh
Raiders.
oh.
So noon kick, that's a 7 a.m. call time. That is leaving Omaha probably at 4 in the morning.
Oh wow.
Oh, it's going to be an early alarm. There was a time in my life where I was more apt to be getting in at 4 a.m. than waking up, but
Well, that's another
those days are
podcast for
long
another time.
past.
We'll have to save that for another time. Now,
Yep.
with back-to-back games like this, or doing 2 major high-level football games potentially on 2 successive days, how in the world do you take care of your voice?
Well, I've gotten a lot smarter about it as life has gone on. I will admit that I was pretty strained toward the end of that Eagles game. The one saving grace, I mentioned that the front end of that doubleheader was Nebraska, Houston, Christian. Um, so where you might push it a little more uh, later in the Nebraska game, it was a big enough blowout to where he could maybe tap the brakes a little more. But other than that, it's just hydrate. It's try to speak from your diaphragm. It's try to use your voice, what your air support well. Drink fluids. I probably should drink more water and less coffee, but I drink coffee all the same. I do have the fisherman's friend cough
Well,
drops
use those
on
myself.
hand.
Yeah.
Yes. So if I need a little help, that's where I get it. But for the most part, it's speak from the
Hmm.
diaphragm, get a lot of air, and hopefully you're not burning it up too much
Hmm.
um, to where you're really strained in that Sunday game.
Yeah, all those things that our elementary school music teachers tried to drum into us and we never paid any
Yeah.
attention to is now something
Yep.
that we really need to pay attention to. Now, I heard you talk about some forms that you've put together. And I know on your website,
Yeah.
naterohr.com, I came across those stat sheets or roster sheets that you kind
Yeah.
of referred to. Talk about what it took to put those together and how important they are to you on game day.
Well, my roster sheets I understand part of it is just having a play-by-play background
Hmm.
too. I've done uh, high school football on the radio
Yeah.
quite a bit, um, but the honest truth is, as a public address announcer, you can usually get by with a flip card if you annotate it correctly.
Hmm.
If you have enough room to put your pronunciations in, I like to have the forms just because it feels better for my prep to have something in my hand that I wrote up, that I split off, that I put pronunciations on, and it's just another mental rep of,
Hmm.
okay, this is number 15. He's the starting
Yeah.
quarterback.
Yeah.
I've got to have his name top of mind.
Yeah.
Um, the stat sheets that I keep, especially for football, those are a little more important than you might think for public address, because my cadence on a normal play, and this is like a lot of guys, I think, ball carried by whomever, tackled by whomever, gain or loss, how whatever's gained or lost yardage wise on the play, new down and distance. Well, I've found that having the prior yardage there makes it easier for me to figure in my head, okay, they're at the 48, they were at their own 31. That's a 17-yard gain,
Yeah.
So it helps in that respect. That's where it's really most
Yeah,
important.
and you don't have to wait for the chains in the box to set itself for the next down. You already know by where the ball landed and where the previous snap was. That's a great point. Yeah.
Sure.
It sounds like your preparation helps give you confidence to just roll through things quickly and still be accurate.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
That's the big thing is, I've been surprised. They always talk about the speed in the NFL, and for a public address announcer, it's not necessarily the speed by which the players run, but rather it's how quickly they are able to get set,
Yeah.
get in formation, and run their next play. And there have been a couple of times where that's caught me off guard, and so learning the rosters to
Yeah.
where I can more quickly spit out what I've got, that helps. And I should point out, I have spotters that help me. Randy, both my spotters at Nebraska are Randy. Randy Randy Bates spots Nebraska for me.
Okay.
Randy Dill spots the opponent,
Yep.
and then Chris Kamler has settled in as my spotter for the Chiefs. So obviously,
Hmm.
having a spotter
Oh,
helps
absolutely it
in
does.
that respect.
Yes.
But if they're feeding you stuff and it's taking you a minute to translate in your head, number 15
Hmm.
is this guy,
Right. Right.
all of a sudden you're starting to get behind
Yeah,
pace.
and that's not time you have. You have to be
Nope.
quick. Yeah. So folks, we're going to step out for a second, take another quick break. We heard him talk about one of his missteps on the mic that still bothers him, and we all have those. And when we come back, we'll give him a chance to talk about one of those. Oh my God, I can't believe I just saw that moment. Announcing the Game is a free resource to public address announcers that take you through how to take your skills to the next level. A simple click on the sport gives you free access to a video that goes over terminology and rules specific to a lot of sports. So take a look. See if we can help you improve your skills. So we're back, folks, with Nate Rohr. So Nate, you've called hundreds of games, from high school all the way up to the top of the mountain with the pros. You mentioned one misstep with trying to introduce something that still bothers you today, and all of us that have been behind the mic have had those moments, and they still bother us. But on the flip side of that, is there one moment in a match or a game somewhere in your career where it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I just saw that. I was a part of watching that?
Yeah. The first moment that comes to mind for me is a fairly recent one. couple of weeks ago, Nebraska played Michigan in a game they ultimately lost. But right at the half, they threw a Hail Mary all the way down the field. Ja'Cory Barney caught it for a touchdown. And that sent the game to halftime tied. And so that one's up there. I would say a game-winning field goal by Lane McCallum against Northwestern a few years ago for Nebraska is up there. He had transferred. He had started his career at Air Force. He transfers back to Nebraska as a safety, and the Huskers were so lost at kicker at that point. They had said, "Hey, you've kicked before. Give it a shot." He kicks a game-winning field goal. There were a couple of plays Mahomes has made in this first 3-week run or the first 3 games with the Chiefs that are up there. And then, Chris Jones got a sack in the game against Baltimore a couple weeks ago. And Chris had been in Mississippi the day of the game for his aunt's funeral. And he had rushed back to Kansas City. The funeral was Sunday morning. They fly him back. He gets to the stadium, I think, right at 3 for a 3:25 kickoff. We didn't even know if we were going to introduce him. And we introduced him in the starting lineup. The roof goes off the place. And then Chris got a sack in that game. And everybody knew, hey, this is a big moment for Jones. So those are my big ones, at least as a public address announcer. I've seen some cool stuff as a spotter, but those are my big ones as a PA guy.
I say that some of those things just have to give you chills up and down your spine. Just me listening to you tell the story about about Jones, it was unbelievable, and then to have that happen to someone like that just gives you chills. Now,
absolutely.
Now, you mentioned earlier those mentors, those people that helped you along the way. Jake Stover, Brian Cook, Matt Coatney, Dale Carter with the Chiefs, and how gracefully he handled that with you. All those people that helped mold you, give you advice, was a sounding board for you and helped you along the way. Well, let's flip things around a little bit. If a young PA announcer is listening or watching right now, maybe getting ready to announce their first youth league game, or maybe a middle school or high school game, maybe they're starting with a team at a junior college or collegiate level, or maybe somewhere in the pros somewhere, what advice would you give them?
Take a deep breath. That would be my first one. Breathe from your stomach. Make sure you're in good understanding of when you can and cannot talk. Funnily enough, that's been something I've had to work on with the Chiefs. The rule's much tighter with when you can talk as a public address announcer in the NFL.
Well, that's one thing. I heard talking to someone else. They said, you can't say anything of consequence when there's 20 seconds left on the play clock. And when it gets to 10, you can't say anything. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
20 seconds on the play clock, you cannot, at 20 on the play clock, you can't make any noise over the public address. And I think they stretch it a little bit if you're waiting and then spitting out 3rd and 7 from the 14.
Yeah.
But you have to have an eye on when you can speak and when you can't. Now, a lot of games, you think of like basketball. Somebody makes a basket, as long as you say who made the basket relatively quickly after it happens, great. So just understand when you can and can't talk. Double check your pronunciations. And then take the job seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. In the end, this is fun, and it's not brain surgery. Nobody's gonna keel over and die if you give the wrong guy a tackle. Nobody's gonna keel over and die if you give the wrong yardage on a punt. So do your best, give it everything you've got, but at the same time, don't be too hard on yourself, and just try and be as accurate as possible. And and you'll have most of it covered.
Yeah.
Because
Great.
In the end, we're an auxiliary to the
Yes.
game. Nobody buys a ticket to hear us.
No, we are part of the production, but we are not
Right.
part of the show. That's absolutely right. Yes.
Right. So yeah, I would say go with that, and just if you can have an understanding of your game, all the better.
Yes. Now, I've got one more question for you before we let you go.
Sure.
You've been behind the mic for a long time now. What keeps you coming back?
The fact that they let me come to games, and not only do they let me into the building, but they pay me to be there. They feed me.
Even better.
They usually give me a pretty good seat, and I get to have a role on game day.
Yes.
A role, a spot on game day. I figured out pretty quickly I wasn't going to bat third for the Royals. I wasn't going to play defensive end for Nebraska or the Chiefs. I figured out that I wasn't going to make it that way. So the idea that I get to have a seat at the table on game day, they're paying me to be there. I love the game so much. I love being around sports so much. The ability to participate in that way is probably the short way of saying what brings me in.
And believe you me, it shows when people listen to you. All that you've talked about, it comes out that way. So thank you very much. So folks, this has been Nate Rohr, the voice of Husker Nation and of Chiefs Kingdom. Nate, as I said, this has been awesome. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to spend some time with us. We really appreciate it. This was a pleasure. Thank you.
I enjoyed talking about the craft and talking with you.
Yeah, good. So as for everybody watching and listening today, thanks for tuning in to yet another episode of PAA Game Day. So check out Nate's stat sheets and prep charts at naterohr.com. And if you can, check out our list of forms and scripts, official signals, pronunciation guides, video tutorials on publicaddressannouncer.org. And remember, everything on there is absolutely free. So keep looking for us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and now we're on Apple Music as we put together our next podcast. So be sure to leave us a review. We're always looking for constructive feedback. And share us with anyone else who'd be interested in learning more about that voice that they hear in the arena, but they never get to know. And speaking of our next podcast, our next one will be interviewing Mark Fraudo from the National Football League's Washington Commanders and the NBA's Washington Wizards. So until next time, I'm Tom Winiecki, and I can't wait to hear you on the mic.